Well, you should find out, again, you told you a bunch of them, so that's not good. You should just type in.
So it's called 30. Started.
One program, only one. So I said.
Good afternoon, trustees and staff. Welcome to the first physical planning, finance, and building committee meeting of the Peel District School Board for this term. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be posted on the PDSB website for future viewing. I'm Jasper Gill, Associate Director of Operations and Equity of Access. As per the Education Act, I'm acting as the designate of the Director of Education and will preside over the meeting until there is a chair and vice chair elected. I now call the meeting to order. Can I have someone move the reports from the closed session we received? Yeah, Mr. Cameron. All in favor? Yeah, thank you. We will now have the land acknowledgement.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe-Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to indigenous and non-indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
The first order of business is the election of the chair and a vice chair of the physical planning, finance, and building committee. So these elections are for a 2-year term. We will now see nominations for the position of chair. Please raise your hand if you wish to put forward a nomination. Please note that a trustee may nominate themselves. Trustee Joe.
I nominate Stan Cameron for chair.
So far I have received one nomination to serve as the chair of the committee. Are there any other trustees who wish to serve as the chair of the committee? So I have a motion from Trustee Joel to appoint Trustee Cameron as chair of the physical planning, finance, and building committee. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Yeah, sure. Trustee Conley. Do you, Trustee Cameron, accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
May I now have a motion that the nomination be closed? Trustee Conley and Trustee Davis. So as there is only one nomination for chair of the physical planning, finance, and building committee. So Trustee Cameron is named for this position. So congratulations, Trustee Cameron.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So we will now receive nominations for the position of vice chair. Please raise your hand if you wish to put forward a nomination. Please note that a trustee may nominate themselves. Trustee Davies.
I'd like to nominate St. Paul Jean. Go, please.
Are there any other trustees who wish to serve as vice chair of the committee? So I have a motion from trustee Davies to appoint trustee Jaw as vice chair of the physical planning, finance and building committee. Do I have a seconder for this position? Trustee Knoll? Do you, trustee Jaw, accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
May I now have a motion that the nomination be closed for the vice chair? Davies, trustee Knoll. So as there is only one nomination for vice chair of the physical planning, finance and building committee, so trustee Jaw is claimed in this position. So congratulations, trustee Jaw.
Thank you.
So now trustee Cameron, you can come and share them.
I get all this water. That's what they call Mr. Acclaimed, right there. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, and good evening to everyone, and thank you very much, colleagues, for this opportunity to serve in this capacity. I will say this is not a committee I've been a chair or vice chair of, so that's my way of asking for patience and understanding, as I might need some of that to get through our first couple of meetings. The first order of business for us now is a approval of the agenda, which we have before us. Trustee Bailey, could I ask you to move that? Thank you. Trustee McDonald, could I ask you to second it? Thank you. With the agenda being approved, we're moving to item 7, which is a declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Excuse me. Thank you. Item 8 is minutes that are here for approval. 8.1 is the Stop Our Student Transportation of Peel Region minutes from their meeting of September 23rd, 2022. Could we have trustee Promoli, right? And trustee Johal, will you second it, please? Thank you. And 8.2 is also here for approval. It's the Fiscal Planning, Finance and Building Committee meeting from November 2nd, 2022. Trustee Clark, will you move that? Thank you. And trustee.
I'm
Sorry, trustee Clark is.
I'm going to.
Okay, we'll take that back. And trustee Cromley will move it, and trustee Davies, will you second it, please? Thank you. That all in favor? That's what I'm missing. Yes, carried. Item 9 is delegations, and we're hearing a delegation from Laura Bowman regarding air quality in schools. Can I call on Laura? She's here. Yes. So we're going to have you come to the first seat with the microphone right there. That's it. Thank you. If you would activate your microphone, and you can begin anytime, Laura. Welcome, first of all.
Thank you. So I have a lot of slides. I might ask staff to kind of scroll through a few of them because I know I only have 10 minutes. I'm Laura Bowman. I'm a PDSB parent. I'm also an environmental health lawyer. And I wanted to present to you today on the issue of school ventilation because I have a lot of concerns about that issue and maybe some gaps in how PDSB is addressing that. So next slide. So I just want to start with addressing the basic concept that cleaner air is always better, and that there is no upper limit to what clean air we should be striving for. Cleaning the air in schools obviously helps reduce the spread of COVID-19, but it also there's a lot of evidence that shows that it improves cognition and productivity, that it reduces the spread of other airborne illnesses, that it protects against outdoor air pollution, it decreases the number of environmental triggers for things like asthma and allergies, which affect student performance and staff performance. And it's also important from an equity and environmental justice perspective because we know that equity-seeking communities are typically located in areas with poorer air quality, both indoor and outdoor. Next slide. So why do we care about school air quality? We know that children are more vulnerable to environmental hazards, particularly in air, because they breathe more air than adults for their size. They also have immune systems which are still developing. And we know that improved indoor air quality, or IAQ, increases productivity, improves the performance of mental tasks, and is involved in improved concentration and recall. Next slide. This chart is probably a little bit hard to read, but it's from the Lancet Review of Indoor Air Quality in Schools from 2022. And it shows that improvements in ventilation in schools improve test scores, they improve cognitive function, they improve specifically things like math scores. And there's a reduction in things that impair attendance. There's a reduction in behavioral problems when ventilation is improved in schools. And we know that there are ways to measure ventilation. Carbon dioxide levels increase when people exhale in a room. And so carbon dioxide levels are a proxy for how much air in the room has already been breathed and how much fresh air is entering the room. We know that air pollution in classrooms is clearly linked to lower performance on exams, that it's clearly linked to an increase in behavioral incidents, that high concentrations of carbon dioxide results in significantly lower performance on standardized tests, and that the impact of high carbon dioxide levels, in particular in classrooms, can be as significant as school shutdowns and class sizes. So you could lower class sizes, but if you're not also improving air quality in your schools, you won't see as significant a learning outcome benefit. Next slide. In one study recently, students in classrooms with higher outdoor air ventilation rates scored as much as 14 to 15% higher on standardized tests than classes that didn't have good ventilation. Next slide. We know that ventilation reduces the spread of COVID-19. COVID-19 is primarily transmitted through airborne aerosols, and these can be removed through both ventilation and filtration, as well as UV disinfection, and there's also a relationship to humidity in the room. Next slide. The Engineering Association that deals with standards for ventilation in HVAC systems has recommended 6 to 12 air changes per hour, or equivalent, through filtration to effectively mitigate COVID-19 in a crowded room. Next slide. We know that allowing COVID-19 transmission in classrooms will negatively impact learning outcomes. I've got some stats along the side about how few students have been vaccinated in Peel region. We have, for kids under 5, less than 1% have received 2 doses. We have, for kids 5 to 11, only 3.9% have received full vaccination, and the stats are not that much better for youth. We know that the impacts can include immune dysregulation, which causes an increase in autoimmune diseases, cognitive dysfunction, as well as more infections and more serious infections with other pathogens, such as RSV, strep A, and flu, which we have certainly seen an increase in the last year. And this is all from a recent January 2023 review in the journal Nature. Next slide. From the Nature review, again, we have a chart of the types of health impacts, and these are quite serious health impacts that happen from infections with COVID-19. And in particular, many of these show an increase in rates with the number of times the person becomes infected. So it's not just the case that you were exposed to the risk with the first infection. Each subsequent infection increases your risks of heart, lung, cognitive dysfunction, immune dysregulation, and a whole host of other problems. Next slide. I'm just going to go to the next slide because I don't think I have time to go through all the ways in which COVID-19 affects learning outcomes, but you can look this up in the journal Nature. But sometimes the cognitive symptoms are delayed as long as a month after the infection, and there's delay associated with young age. Next slide. The bottom line is that students do not have to be catching COVID at school. We know that the risk of infection can be significantly reduced and virtually eliminated with enough air changes in the classroom. And next slide. Obviously, one solution to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 is masking. I just want to highlight that although I know PDSB did send something out recommending masking, it was one email. It was buried in an attachment to the email. I don't think many parents read it. We also don't distribute high-quality masks and 95 masks, which are needed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in children's sizes, which not everyone knows how to obtain. You need well-fitting, high-quality masks, and I know the province was procuring very low-quality cloth masks, which are not appropriate. So what we need is better communication with parents about the risks, about the benefits of masking, and better access to good quality masks. Next slide. It's important to understand that although the filters were upgraded in schools that had mechanical ventilation, many schools either have no mechanical ventilation or partial mechanical ventilation, meaning entire wings of the schools have no ventilation, no fresh air exchange, eliminating the carbon dioxide levels so that they can think clearly, eliminating pollution from the room. So there's a huge problem with not having a clear board commitment or plan for upgrading those in the long term with mechanical ventilation. I feel strongly that all of the parts of all of the schools should have mechanical ventilation given the link to learning outcomes, because you can't get the CO2 levels down just with filtration. You need to get some fresh air in the room. Next slide. What the board has done so far with filtration is a good start. You put the MERV 13 filters, which are what you need to eliminate pathogens in places where you have mechanical ventilation. But in terms of the HEPA filters that you have in the rooms, there's inadequate controls and operational function. They're not turned on when the kids are in the room because they're too loud. And what you need are many smaller HEPA units or DIY filters so that you can have quiet filtration that's on all the time. Because what's happening is you put in industrial-sized filters, they sound like a train running, the kids can't hear the teacher, they get stressed after a while from the noise, and people just start turning them off and leaving them off. You currently only require HEPA units in K-2 or 2-3 splits, which means that kids who are in wings without mechanical ventilation age out of clean air. When they hit grade 3, they can be in an unmechanically ventilated wing with no filtration.
Laura, to just capture the time, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm almost done. The ministry guidelines require an engineering assessment so that you can ensure that the HEP units are appropriately sized for the rooms. Now, I've had some interaction with DDSB facility staff about this, and they just cite to me the sizing when it's on the maximum level all the time. And I know from talking to teachers, from attending the school, that they're not on full all the time. And so the engineering solution that's recommended by HVAC experts is many smaller HEPAs. Now that sounds expensive. Next slide. There are very cheap, cost-effective solutions. In that picture, you see what is called a Corsi-Rosenthal box. It's basically a box fan duct tape to some furnace filters. And this has been tested by ULI in the States. We know that it's not a fire hazard, that it's not an electrical hazard because the fans are already CSA approved. The filters are tested and approved for the purpose of moving air through a fan. And if you're not comfortable with the DIY version, there are commercial versions available that are basically just a filter that clips to a box. It's a fantastic STEM opportunity for students to build these, and you can see on the chart that when you turn them on, the levels of air pollution contaminants in the room drop dramatically. And there's a website called cleanaircrew.org that shows you how you can put these systems into schools, and many schools in the US have implemented these systems. Next slide. The board has also put UV disinfection into the mechanical ventilation systems. And, a few months ago, I would have said that was a good idea. But the newer research shows that this can actually change the air chemistry in a negative way, converting air pollution particles into VOCs and things that are not so good to breathe in. So something to consider. Next slide.
This has to be the last.
Next slide, sorry, that's just a stray from the, I'm finished.
Okay.
You can just turn it off.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the time you've taken to put that presentation together and the time to come to present it to us, to share it with us. For trustees, I'd like to share our next steps here is it's our opportunity to ask Laura, our delegator, clarifying questions. So questions of clarification that help us and give us an opportunity to learn perhaps a bit more. But it is not an opportunity for any debate at any level for anybody around the table. And we can open the floor for that. If you have a question of clarification, be happy to start that process. Trustee Davids, go ahead.
In your opinion, of the two things that you mentioned, filtration and ventilation, which one do you think would be most effective to tackle first?
Well, it's obviously going to be expensive to upgrade huge parts of schools to mechanical ventilation. So I see that as more like a long-term objective. You want to have a plan in place. You want to be looking for funding to implement that plan. And when funding becomes available, be ready to jump on that opportunity. But in the meantime, the filtration is probably the best you can achieve in the unmechanically ventilated parts of schools. But you can also implement policies, things like putting fans in windows, policies about when windows should be open to try and get a little bit more fresh air into the non-mechanically ventilated areas.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions of clarification for our delegator? Yes, Trustee Probably.
Sorry, I took a lot of notes. Instead, just Chair, sorry, through you. Just a point of clarity, are we able to, at this point, ask for reports also, or is that something we'd have to do at a later point?
Yes, that would come after we've had our questions of clarification as to next steps, what we can do in terms of getting this referred to administration.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so Laura, first of all, thank you so much for coming in and talking about this today. I am a public health advocate. Some of my colleagues here will recognize me because the first time they met me was coming here 3.5 years ago to talk about improving our flu prevention measures in schools. So it's just another chapter in all of that work that we have to do to make sure that we're making our schools as safe and accessible for all of our students and for the people who spend their days working with them. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done here. And oh, thank you. I didn't put on my mic. Oh, I'm terrible. There we go. Okay. Okay. So I was wondering if you have in your research come across any correlation or any connections between absences from school and largely caused by illness and outcomes in learning. Have you come across anything like that?
Yeah, there definitely is research linking absences and learning outcomes. I didn't bring any citations with me today, unfortunately, though.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So I'm wondering also, when we're talking about the DIY options, of course, the Rosenthal boxes, have you had any experience with those yourself?
Yes, I meant to bring one today, but they're really easy to build. They only take about 5 or 10 minutes to put together. All you need is cardboard, duct tape, box fan, and some filters. They've been very extensively tested by a whole variety of engineers in the US and Canada and elsewhere. My kids love these things. They love building them. We build more than we need because they enjoy building and using them. But the picture I showed had a balloon. Kids love suspending balloons in the air above them. And they only cost, about $60 to $100 each to build, and they move as much air or more air than the commercial units do. So you've been paying $300, $600 for these industrial-sized HEPA filters, but for that same amount, you could have 6 Corsi Rosenthal boxes with quieter fans. And people not only use box fans, but computer fans, which make almost no noise at all.
So how many would you put into a classroom?
So it really depends on the volume of air in the room. Like if you're talking like a gym, you would need probably bigger ones that can move more air with the box fans. But there's really simple calculators you can use to figure out how many you need, and people have tested the clean air delivery rate of each one, different designs of them. So you just plug that into the calculator with the room volume and the occupancy, and you can figure out what kind of combinations that you need. It's very easy to do.
Okay. Is there sort of a link that you could send over to us that would be helpful?
The cleanaircrew.org link has the designs for the different types of boxes, the testing. They have a video from a school showing you how to do it. They have all the information there.
Okay, that's great. Before we move on, I just want to make sure I don't have any more questions for Laura. Sorry, I took a lot of notes. Okay. I appreciate that you mentioned the communications. I do feel that we could, I always want to see more communications about illness prevention. So thank you for mentioning that. I think you're right. Sometimes the communications, because we get so many things that come home, sometimes the things that are really important will get lost. Like I know that, but anyway, so I'm glad that you brought that up. I don't know if I have anything else for you, so let me just see. Okay, I think that's all that I have for you, Laura, but thank you again. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification from trustees? Seeing none, as a committee of trustees, we have an opportunity to move and second an opportunity to refer this presentation to administration. The way it's worded is it goes to the director or the director's designate on this committee. It's Associate Director Gill and his team that we could refer this to for their response back to Laura and also back to this committee, obviously, for us to see the response. Could I have, if that's okay with the committee, Trustee Davis, will you move that idea to refer to Associate Director Gill, and Trustee Cromoli will second it. All in favor of that idea? Thank you. That's carried. So Laura, thank you. We will get a response. There is no timeline that I could give you as to when you will get that. That is determined by the director and the director's designate, in this case, Associate Director Gill and his team. So we will wait for them. Presumably it would be before our next meeting, which is March 1st. But I'm committing to that. But that's perhaps a hopeful wish on my part. Thank you for your time. We appreciate meeting you. Thank you.
Trustee,
Yeah.
or Chair, and so are we able to ask for reports following up on this from her presentation? Or do we wait for the response from?
Yeah, we need to see as a frame of reference what it is we would question or raise suggestions from. And so that would be our next step, is to allow administration to put together that response and that report and let us see it then for our further interaction.
Okay, before we submit further questions to go along with the.
Right,
Okay.
we wouldn't have a frame of reference yet exactly what they will say, right? So we will wait for the report and thank administration for their effort to get that back to us as quickly as they can. We know they will. So thank you. We have heard the delegation. We have moved and seconded the referral to administration. And so we'll move on to section 10 on the agenda, which are staff reports. These reports are here for receipt only. So we will move and second these reports after the presenters have made the presentation. So we hear what they have to say first. The first one, 10.1, is Major Capital Projects Report. This will come from Suzanne Blakeman, who is our Manager of Planning and Accommodation Support Services. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Chair Cameron. Through you, Chair. Before you is a table containing the current status of the 9 ministry funding approved new school, childcare, and addition projects. And I'm happy to take any questions or clarification.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification for Manager Blakeman? Seeing none, could Trustee McDonald, will you move that report, please? Trustee Joe Hall, will you second that? Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 10.2 is the application status update. This is coming to us from Nick Gooding, who is a planner for our Development Planning and Accommodation Department. And Nick, go ahead with your report, please.
Thank you, Chair Cameron, and through you, Chair. This report is for information and includes a list of development applications that were reviewed by planning staff for the months of October, November, and December of 2022. And it also includes location maps and letters sent to the respective municipalities. With respect to the listed applications, the anticipated number of students that will be generated were either included in previous projections and sufficient school accommodation is in place, or accommodation will be provided by new schools approved by the board's annual planning document recently approved. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Are there any questions of clarification? Trustee McDonald, yes.
Yeah, so there's an infill at the College Way area. So it's quite a lot of townhouses. 340 some. Is that right? You got it right?
3355.
I lost where I was in my document here. Okay, here we go. This is McDonald, item 6.
Yes.
Okay. So there's that's a lot of kids. And I'm more worried about the elementary. Do we have enough accommodations for that?
Yeah, we do work with the enrollment side of our planning department to deal with the accommodation issues.
Mm-hmm.
And with respect to the pressures, we also work with the municipality and the city to designate school sites, and that's also displayed in the annual planning documents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? Seeing none, I would just like to add that this is a very healthy report in looking at this with respect to the numbers of potential students coming our way. Could I just clarify, when I look at the report and I see the enrollment numbers at the schools, does that include what you're projecting will come, or is that not including that?
The enrollment The anticipated student, that's the projected student yield. The current enrollment is not included. So the yield you see on the right-hand side column of the table, that's a projected yield.
Right. I understand questions around accommodation pressures when we look at what might be coming our way, and but it's very healthy. We're looking for higher enrollment, and I appreciate this, the detail of your report, Nick. If there are no other questions, Trustee Bailey, will you move this report, please? And Trustee Promoli, will you second it? Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 10.3 is the tender activity report, and this will be brought to us by Wendy Dobson, who is the Acting Controller of Corporate Support Services. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you and good evening. Through you, Chair, you will find attached on page 67 to 72 of your package the tender activity report for the time period of October 1st, 2022, December 31st, 2022. I'm happy to take any questions regarding this report.
So are there any questions around the table for the tender activity report at 10.3 on the agenda? Seeing no questions of clarification. Trustee Joe Hall, will you move this, please? Yes. Trustee Davies, will you second it? Thank you. All in favor? That's carried for receipt. And 10.4 is the vandalism activity report, also brought to us by Wendy Dobson. Go ahead, Wendy. Thanks.
Thank you. And through the Chair, beginning on page 75 of your package is the Appendix 1 monthly report of vandalism activity from a period of August to October 2022. The second appendix in the report on page 79 is the break and enter vandalism year-end summary report. Appendix 3 is your break-in and vandalism year-end of 2021 for 2022 on page 80. And then on page 81 is your appendix 4, your break and enter vandalism annual comparison. One point of notice that I would like to make is the significant decline that we have had in vandalism and the comparison over previous years. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Yes, Trustee Promoli.
You got it.
Yeah, Promoli.
So through you, Chair.
On your mic, please.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. I'll get the hang of this.
Yes, I will too with your name.
So I was wondering if we had any idea what the reason was for the significant decrease, because we did see that over time, those numbers were ticking up, and then now in this past year, is it just because we're back in schools more often again now? Like, is it just because we're fully occupying our buildings again?
Through the Chair, that's part of it, yes, definitely. I think reactionary and making sure that we are having security monitor our schools on a more frequent level is also helped to improve, and being notified in a timely manner of any activity that may be happening in school property.
Great.
That's excellent. It's an excellent reduction. That's obviously an excellent part of this report. Are there any other questions or clarifications? Yes, Trustee Bailey.
I noticed that a lot of the playgrounds have the lights on. Has that made a difference? Through the Chair, I don't have Associate Director Gilwell.
So through you, Chair Cameron, in fact, yes, it did. So I would say go back probably around 5 years ago when we did it sort of as a test. We tried in some areas where we switched the lights off, and the vandalism as well as any other illegal activities went down in fact. So there was not only the savings in the use of the electricity, which is savings in us paying our utility bills, but also the illegal activities and other things in fact went down. So I would say majority, I'm not aware of any site where once we turn the lights off that there was an issue because of that. And so since then we continue with that approach.
Thank you. Any other questions of clarification? Seeing none. Trustee Bailey, will you move the vandalism activity report? And Trustee McDonald, will you second? Thank you. All in favor? That is carried as well. Thank you. Moving on to item 11, there are no trustee motions for consideration from previous meetings carried forward. And moving on to item 12, there are no trustee notices of motion currently submitted. And item 13 is adjournment. Trustee Davies, will you move that? Thank you. And Trustee Promoli, just so I can keep saying the name correctly. Will you please second it? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. And I don't know if the meeting's over, so this is off the record, but the Toronto Maple Leafs play the Boston Bruins